Hey guys, it's Julian, and today I am going to be talking to you about techniques to make your low end bigger and fatter and just more powerful and better in general for minimal deep house. I make a lot of videos in this style, talking about like that sort of like, PIV Records, Fuse London style of just super deep, kind of sophisticated minimal stuff. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the process I take to make my bass cake as fat and as full and as professional sounding as possible. So what I have in front of me here is actually a project file from one of my older videos. Some of you guys may recognize it. And what I've done is I've taken all the processing off the kick and the bass. You can see here's the kick, nothing on there. Got the bass, nothing on there. They're not even in a group, nothing. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to, like I said, walk you through my process of how I go about making this sound really big and full. And then what I've got here is I've got this as like an audio file down here. Here's what it sounds like with no processing. And we're going to compare that with the finished product. So like I said right here, we've got the kick and bass. And what I'll usually do to start off with is work with the kick. I like to kind of work from the most basic elements up. So to me, the most basic element in a house track is the kick. That is literally the loudest thing and the thing that you hear the most through the track. So here's our kick. And right off the bat, it's important to note, like we're starting with something that sounds really good. Already, this is a really solid 909 kick. And we don't really need to do a whole lot of stuff to make it sound good. It's just to make it fatter and better. So that's something you want to start with. Is make sure you start with a really good sample, because you can't take a bad sample and make it really good, but you can take a really good sample and make it great. That's what we're going for. So yeah, so with the kick here, we got a 909. That's usually what I'll start with. And the first thing I usually do is just put a bit of saturation on the kick. It's a great way to really beef it up. Like, what I'll usually use is some saturator. So we can just take the saturator and I'll put it up maybe like there. And cool, so right off the bat, you can hear it goes from this to this. So it sounds a lot more full and a lot fatter and a lot more punchy already. And this is what you need, because just the kick on its own is just really not going to do it. Like, if you've ever been in a club, I'm sure you have, you're watching this video, and you've heard this kind of music, you don't just hear the kick on the system going like, doom, doom, doom. It's like, doom, doom, doom. Like, it's really hitting like that. So you have to do everything you can to get it there. And actually, I think I'm going to get rid of the saturator and use drum bus. Drum bus is also saturation. It's just got a little bit more stuff in there. So we'll take this and we'll turn the crunch up a bit, turn the drive up a bit, and put it on the medium setting. And there we go. Now we really get that fullness. So again, without it. And then with it. So right off the bat, that really helps. From there, we can use this transients here. Like I'll use that and just turn it up. And you can hear that really helps with the punch right at the start of the kick. If you don't know what a transient is, it's this thing. You can see it like, it's literally just that click like right at the start of the sound. Like if we take this and I will just do this really quick. It's that. That's the transient. And you need that because you can see if I cut it off, the kick is way too soft. So turning up the transient knob is just boosting that. And so that's what a transient shaper is. It allows you to kind of work with the transients of a sound and shape them and kind of like mold them into what you need. Now, another technique that I like to use to kind of help with the transient of the kick here, and this is part of really making it sound full and fat, is to actually do this. So what I'll do is typically we'll take the kick and then I'll layer it with a rim shot actually. Like we can get one, I'll just take one of mine from one of my sample packs, maybe this one. Let's use this one actually because it's a little bit stronger. And what you can do is if you literally just put that over the kick, like on top of it, and you kind of like get the transients a little bit more lined up. You can hear it. There we go. We get a really, really punchy kick now. So again, here's without this. And then with it. So you can hear this really has that attack now. And it's a really simple way to do that because it's like you're not really hearing this and thinking like, oh, there's a rim shot on top of the kick. You're just hearing a really punchy and really hard hitting kick. And you can hear the difference too, like in the mix. Like I'll turn this rim shot off. And then we'll turn it on. So that's a really great technique, and I've talked about that a little bit more before in the context of techno tracks, but it really helps with this style too. I mean, you can really use this with anything. You can use this with a dubstep kick if you want. You can use this with like a rock kick if you wanted to. Really, it's just a really great way to add like a simple like right at the start of the kick like that. And yeah, that's really about it for the kick. You know, you really don't need a whole lot. It's just some simple saturation and maybe a little bit of transient shaping, and like layering the rim shot on top of the kick really helps as well. I'll usually do a little bit of EQ as well at the end. Like I like to kind of boost here, especially when you got the rim shot in there. As you can hear, it really helps with the punch. Maybe we can even boost a little bit of 100 hertz, because that's typically where like the doom is that I was talking about. And yeah, there it is. There's the kick. So usually once I get the kick sounding really solid like this, then I'll move up to the bass and kind of like build it from there. I like to start with the kick because that's that constant pulse, and then the bass is going to fill in the spaces a little bit with the groove. So with the bass, we have this bass sound here. It's really simple. It's actually just a sine wave, or a square wave, but it's being put through a low pass filter. So there we go. It's a really simple, just round and warm bass. This is the type of bass you want for this style. And with the bass, it's really not that much more complicated than the kick. I'll usually take that, put a little bit of saturation on it. Like we'll go maybe like that. And you can hear how that's fattening it up. Maybe turn the bass frequency up a little. Kind of adds some mid-range in there. Another technique you can do is if you're working with operator like this, which I know a lot of you guys do because I use this, and a lot of synths have this as well, is you can use this shaper here, which just kind of adds a little bit of drive to the filter. And this can be a really good way to fatten your bass up too. Like I'll show you, like we put it even just on the soft setting. There we go. You can hear what that adds. Like that kind of fills it out nicely as well. It's just about getting this like pretty fat sounding bass already and pretty like warm sounding bass, and just kind of like adding a bit of saturation on top of it to really like fill it out like this. And then after the saturation, what I typically do is a bit of EQ, because the saturation is going to add a lot of like kind of just extra stuff in like the low mid range towards about 100 hertz. So what you can do is you can EQ it, and you can get a really clean sound while still getting the fatness of the saturation. So I'll show you what I mean. I'll just kind of EQ this here. Typically we cut at 100, because that's where I was boosting the kick, and that's where the punch in the kick is. And we can cut a bit there as well. And I'll even boost the low end a bit usually. And there we go. So like I said, this really refines the sound, because again, the saturation is going to add a lot of fatness to the sound, but it's also going to add some mud and some just extra stuff that you don't really want. So if you cut that like that, you can keep it super clean and super controlled. And it's like, I feel like if you use the saturation without this, people are just going to listen to your tracks and say, oh, it sounds super saturated and super crunchy. But if you use the saturation and then you EQ it and then kind of clean it up like this, you can, you know, people don't really notice it so much. And it's not like, oh, this is just saturation music, but more so like this is just something with a lot of fatness to it and a lot of character. So then from there, the last thing I'll typically do is just sidechain it to the kick a little bit. There's a few different ways you can do this. You know, we could just get a compressor and sidechain it to that instrument rack. That's the kick. And then we have it sidechain. And you can hear this kind of allows us to keep the signal a little bit more clean, because now we're able to turn the bass up a little bit more, as you can hear it, because it's under control of the kick. Now, one thing you also got to keep in mind here is gain staging. What gain staging is if you look at this, you can see how where my cursor is right now? The line is green, and then coming out of the EQ, it's red, and then coming out of the compressor, it's like even more red. So gain staging is essentially just going through and making sure that that doesn't happen. And it's very easy with Ableton, because you can just kind of follow these. But yeah, the way that you solve this is just by going back like to this output here. and just turn that down a little bit. And then you can see it's not clipping anywhere in the chain. So now we can just turn the volume on the track up a little. And there we go. It makes it a little bit cleaner. And we can do that on the kick a little as well. As you can see, it's happening a little bit more slightly, but it's still important to get it. So we just turn this down. Turn that up, and there you go. And yeah, and like I was saying, there's a few different ways you can sidechain. Another way that I like to do it is using AutoPan, actually. So if I open up AutoPan right now, my default AutoPan is already set up for this, but I'll set it up. This is the way that yours probably looks if you're just now pulling it up. It looks like this, right? So AutoPan is a tool which pans your sound from left to right. However, the way that it pans the sound from left to right is not some magic trick. It's not anything crazy. It's literally just turning up the volume of the right signal while it's turning down the volume of the left signal, and then the opposite. And it's just going back and forth like that. So what you can do is you can turn the phase down all the way, which is essentially how stereo it is, and you can make it. So now you can hear it's just affecting the mono volume. And then all that you have to do is just take this, set it to quarter notes, and then we put it on the saw waveform, and then if you invert that, there we go. We get a really similar effect, and this is good if you have a kick that, like, sometimes, like, if your kick is too long or something, sidechaining to the compressor can have some problems, especially, like, if you're working with techno and you have rumble kicks. You can't really sidechain something to that because it's going to be, you know, just completely ducked out by the rumble. So this AutoPan is a good way to do it and have a little bit more control over it as well because you can play with the shape. And do a lot of different stuff with it. So we'll stick with the compressor for now. But yeah, so there is the bass. Now we have the kick and the bass sounding pretty good together. The last step here that I'll typically do is I'll just put them in a group together. And then we usually give the group a little bit of saturation and some EQs. So what we can do is, there we go, is we just get a saturator on here. And you don't need to do much because you can already hear it's pretty fat and pretty full, but if we take this and, like, we'll put the drive up maybe +5, and I'll put the output down a little. Again, we're keeping gain staging in mind. And then we can EQ it a little because, again, the saturation is going to add a little bit of stuff, like in the low mid-range. And we can also boost the mid-range flat out a little to make it hit a bit more. And then we boost the bass a little as well. And there we go. You can hear this just takes it that extra step of the way. Like, here's without the saturation and EQ. And then with it. It's subtle, but you can hear what's happening there is it's gluing your low end together. This is part of what makes a lot of these, like, professional tracks that you guys talk about sound really professional. Like I said, stuff on PIV Records, Fuse London, sort of like that type of sound, is they're really good at gluing their low end together. The way you have to think of it is not like the kick as a drum, but think of it more as just part of the low end. And what you're trying to do is glue this together, because ultimately, if you can glue your low end together, it's going to sound tighter and more together, obviously, like I said, and just kind of more like one thing. And that's really what you want. You want every element of your track to come together and kind of like dance with each other, as opposed to having it be like, okay, here's the kick and here's the bass, and they're in very different places. Like I said, you really want them to kind of come together and work with each other. So what better way to do this than to glue them together with some processing? So that is the purpose of that. And also, like I said, it just gives everything a little bit more of a boost. Cool. So now we've gone through and we've done everything to make this sound fatter. Let's listen to the original kick and bass, and then we'll play this one. So here's the original. And here is the one with the processing. We'll go back and forth a little. There we go. It's way fatter and just way stronger in general. You know, I think it really makes the track shine. It's like the difference between this and this is pretty small. Like, it's really just in the low end, but this sounds a lot more professional and a lot more full now. We can probably turn those down. But there we go. So that is how you would go about, taking your low end from nothing to a really full and professional sounding mix, and something that's going to work really well in your tracks and make them sound professional and full and as good as the pros. So that's going to be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe, and let me know what you think of this video in the comments. If you want to get the project file from this video, the link is in the description right at the top. Definitely go check that out. And if you guys want to support me as well, since I don't really have like a new project file with this video, definitely check out all my sample packs in the description. They're all like $5 or $10. Super cheap, but there's some really, really high quality sounds in there. And just honestly, some really valuable stuff. When I make these packs, I don't just try to make sample packs to sell something to my subscribers. I make sample packs to make something that doesn't exist, that's something that's very high quality, and something that you can really use in tracks to sound good and sound like the pros and get just like a really high quality level, and not just have all these sounds that are completely unusable like so many other sample packs. So all of that is in the description. Definitely go check that out. I also just dropped a remix, which I will leave at the top of the description as well. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone, and I'll see you tomorrow with another video.